I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Thursday, June the 11th. And if the Packers didn't have enough troubles already after the gouging that they did during the coronavirus, and now these box beef cutout values are plunging as they try to just rob the bank and leave and take what they got and get things back to normal and take their place back in the manipulation that they normally keep. Now they've got a class action suit that's been filed. If they didn't have already enough trouble, they have a big group of cash is king guys and some rogue state affiliates that are trying to force them to buy a minimum requirement of negotiated cash cattle every week per facility. Now they've got legislation before the Senate there with signers including Charles Grassley, John Tester, so we've got bipartisanship there. We've got several other senators that have signed on both sides of the aisle there, and a big push on that. The Packers have been trying to discount the antitrust suit that RCAF USA has filed against them. They've had multiple attorneys general from states all across the land plea for an investigation by the Department of Justice. It got traction. It made it all the way up to your Secretary of Agriculture and even all the way up to President Donald Trump, who said that he wanted to look and see what the bottom of it was and why they continued to bring so much beef over from overseas whenever we've got plenty of cattle here. Of course, I realize that we've been backed up because we haven't been able to keep enough workers on the line there due to the coronavirus, but we seem to have the lion's share of those back on now, and so things are getting kind of back to normal. And just as the Big Four Packers thought they could kind of catch their breath, now they've got a class action suit from Central Grocers out of Minnesota, which is made up of several retail grocery marts there, and accusing them of conspiring since 2015 to constrain beef supplies. Oh, surely not. They wouldn't do that. They've even got a witness on the inside that used to be employed by one of the big Packers there that has firsthand account that he was in conversations, saw proof of it, that they were creating surpluses of cattle by declining the amount of production that they were putting out, by scaling back their purchases, and they were creating a surplus of cattle and a shortage of beef, and then colluding with each other, which is all illegal there whenever you're running a monopoly, which shouldn't be allowed anyway. But they were doing this and then colluding with one another to set prices, to keep production at a minimal level there so that they can continue to control things. But we'll see what this gets done. I mean, I don't know how much you can throw against the wall before some of it starts to stick. But this might have the best chance of any of it, being that it's coming from the retail beef side, from Central Grocers. It's a class action suit. Whether it's a judge or a jury or however they're going to get that done, if they don't get it thrown out beforehand, it might be easier to do, because likely whoever you get that makes a decision, whether it's a judge or a jury, they're going to think, why in the world, if they're looking at a suit from your cattleman's side, why are you letting these guys push you around like this? Don't sell cattle to them. Well, easy for them to say. They don't really understand all the dynamics of feeding cattle. But what they would think, well, why have you allowed them to get such a monopoly on things? Well, why don't you set up some smaller packing plants so you have an outlet for your beef? Why would you raise so many cattle if you don't have a way to sell them in a competitive nature? Good questions. But again, there's all the dynamics of the beef business there. But now that we've got something coming from the retail side, they can say, hey, we need this beef so we can sell it to our customers in the retail counter here. And these guys are slowing down production. They're setting the price. They're colluding with one another, and they're keeping the prices up there, and they're taking more than their share. Well, that seems kind of believable, and that's something that that people that are outside of the industry, outside of the business, and don't really understand things, they can see that. And we've seen it happen with our chicken, with Pilgrim's Pride. We've seen it happen in the tuna industry, where they actually get some traction on this. But due to the dynamics of the cattle business, and being that there's still so many independent producers and independent cattle feeders out there, it makes it really tough for those that are making the decisions to understand, what all is going on there, and how we could allow them to get this done. We wish, your packers have a monopoly there. They're 80-85% or more of the business there. Your cattle producers, your cattle feeders don't. You would think that maybe they would try, if they had the cohesion of some violent gangbangers, maybe they could come in and try to take things over, but we just don't have that. If we tried to get our cattle feeders, if we had them all locked in a big ballroom as they were trying to make decisions, there would be a handful that would be texting their packer trying to make an under-the-table deal while it was going on, and you guys know that. But we just cannot seem to get together. We can't get on any legislation to push. We can't even get guys to call in to their representatives and their senators to try to get something done. It's very, very frustrating, and who knows how it's ever going to get fixed. But if we don't get something done, if we don't get minimum negotiated cash requirement, if we don't get one of these lawsuits to take a hold, if we don't see something happen during the atmosphere that's about right now, it's never going to happen. So we've got to get something done right now while the iron's still got some scald to it, and we've got to get something done. Maybe we haven't heard yet, but it's a possibility. It's unclear whether we're going to have NCBA representatives showing up there at the trial as a character witness for the Packers. That could be. We don't know. That's their buddies, and they seem to be working just as hard or harder for them than they are the jillions of cattle producers all across the country that are paying the bulk of the tab for all of that supposedly voice for the industry. But we'll just have to see what happens. But we've got to get something done here, guys, and this might be another good chance here. And I would think that all of this publicity that the Big Four Packers are getting, we would have enough push to get the votes, to get some legislation done, to get something done here. But I tell you what, it's like fighting City Hall, but each one of those Big Four Packers is bigger than anybody that's trying to fight against them. And each one of those Big Four Packers are bigger than the USDA. So it's going to be an uphill fight, but my gosh, how much more can get out without something getting done? Let's talk about your board for Wednesday. June live cattle futures up 27 cents at 96.60, and we're finally starting to see your live cattle contracts make some sense. So we for the first time in a long time, we see that, especially through this coronavirus, we see June live cattle actually trading higher than August. Well, that makes sense to people, because we know that this problem with all these big heavy cattle and market ready cattle, even if they weren't backed up, was all going to come to fruit during the dog days and the heat of the summer. Well, so now we're starting to see that. Now, not that that helps anything, but it does make you feel good when you look at some of these fundamentals and things actually kind of make sense a little bit. But like I said, August live cattle contracts, June was up 27, August down $1.30, now trading at 96.50 on the close on Wednesday. So that's 10 cents under what your June live cattle are, and that does make a little bit of sense. But you're going out front from there, down 75 cents to down $1.25. August feeder cattle down 157. They giveth, they taketh away, up and down, back and forth, yo-yo. We're starting to see volatility again in our cattle futures, but August feeder cattle contracts closing on Wednesday at 132.67. September down to $1.40 at 134.15. You go to your out fronts on your feeder cattle and they were down 67 cents to $1.22. Your fat cattle trade, and you know, through this coronavirus, we've been seeing a lot of negotiated trade. Whether they're trying to make it look good, whether it's just they can buy those cash cattle cheaper than they can buy the grids or their formula cattle. You know, you decide which one do you think it is, what they're doing, and why they did so much of it. But I've been talking about this week that we're likely going to see a lot less negotiated cash trade, especially in comparison to your formulas, and that is ringing true. Through Tuesday, 14,200 head, which is sizable if we were under normal conditions, but it's way less than half of what we had through Tuesday of last week. So we saw some more trade happen on Wednesday. Prices are sharply lower. Guys are still lined up to take it. Iowa had confirmed sales of 400 head. The live price was 101. The dress price 165. Nebraska, 8,000 head there. They had a live price there on a range from 103 to 108, and dress sales of steers and heifers from 165 to 172. At 172 on Wednesday was the best we'd seen so far this week. 168 was the highest we'd seen so far, but that 172 is still $15 lower than the high we saw on the top of the dressed price range last week. Kansas, 3,600 head there. Live sales from 107 to 108 and a few dressed at 172. Texas, 3,900 head. Their range was a little wider and the low was quite a bit lower, with live sales steers and heifers ranging from 98 cents to $1.08. Box beef cutout values continue to plunge, and they may back up all the way to below 210, back where they were when we first started seeing them jolt to the stratosphere right during the worst of the COVID crisis. But choice cuts on Wednesday afternoon, 236.06 down 10.94. Selects 222.84 down $5.11. Continue to see heavy volume on the immediate delivery spot there at 256 loads of cuts, grinds, and trimmings. Slaughter continues at a good pace here for everything that's been going on. Through Wednesday, 350,000 head harvested. That's up 10,000 from last week, down just 14,000 from the same week a year ago when everything was normal and they had the change speeds turned up pretty high. Let's talk about your feeder cattle, your real-time index on DV auction late on Wednesday. This is based on an 800-pound steer in all your auctions that are reported up through the middle 12 states. 129.24, down 85 cents. So, you know, we saw that back up. But most of your Southern Plains sales were steady to a little bit higher for the most part, especially on steers. But I think the main reason that we saw your RTI drop on Wednesday is we didn't have a really good test in your Northern Plains and in your Upper Midwest sales. A lot of them are going every other week and they just have a light run. But this happened to be a Wednesday where we didn't have a really good test in some of those high northern cattle to hold that index price up. But look at your big sales. OKC West, El Reno, Oklahoma, 8,400 head for the 2-day sale, and very light on the calves on Tuesday. But you compare that to last year, they only had 1,500 head. We are catching up, and we're going to be caught completely up on our feeder cattle marketings here pretty darn quick. You look at your trend called by Market News there. Feeder steers $1 to $2 higher. Feeder heifers fully steady. Calves not well tested. Like I mentioned, they didn't have very many calves at all earlier in the week there. But look at this automated market report from Cattle Market Central through DV Auction there, and you look at the changes on your weighted average prices there, and I wouldn't argue much from what your Market News reporters call the market right there. It goes right along, but I want to give you guys some quotes on all the steers and heifers that come through the ring there in El Reno. 700 head, 754 pound on the average on your 7-weight steers, 128.55, and that was about $4 lower on your weighted average, but a lighter test there on those lighter cattle, but just not as many of them, and we know that things aren't likely to get much better down the road, so we saw pretty good demand for your heavier weight cattle here going right into the feedlot. 1,505 head of your 8-weight steers averaged $8.50 right on the button with a weighted average price of $122.94. That was up about $1. 1,047 head of the 9-weight steers in El Reno averaged $9.47 at $112.55. That was up about $1.50 just on your weighted average price there. Look at some of your heifers. 871 head of the 6-weight heifers averaged $6.48 at $125.26. Up $2.50 there. Nearly 1,000 head of the 7-weight heifers averaged $7.47 at $117.21. That was off a bit, but not bad. 663 head of 8-weight heifers in El Reno, Oklahoma. 843 pounds on the average, $109.45 on the weighted average price, which was down just a little over $1 from your weighted average price a week ago. The biggest stick-out sale I saw out of OKC West was 56 head of 802-pound steers, still bring $132.50. That's pretty impressive there. Dodge City, Kansas, winter livestock, 1,700 head for them, and they are ganging up. They're going to have that huge King of the Ring sale here later in the summer, and going to have a lot of grass yearlings on that sale, and may already be ganging up for that. Feeder steers weighing over 800 pounds in Dodge City, steady to $3 higher. Feeder heifers weighing over 750, steady to $2 lower, and not a real good test on anything other than that. Give you a quote over in western part of Oklahoma there. Cherokee Sales Company, Cherokee, Oklahoma. They're Jared Herman, my buddy there, he's running an awful good sale there, and he's still getting some of these cattle coming off graze out wheat, and there hadn't been much out there for them to eat, and the combines are running over there where they do have some wheat there to cut, and been a world of it rolled up into hay, and a lot of it that's been chopped into wheat leads there. But 61 head, 914 pound steers in Cherokee, Oklahoma bring 122.25, and that's a pretty good price on some big steers like that. How about a market that I don't know if I've ever talked about before, but got a quote from them on Cattle Market Central out of Lewiston Livestock Market, Lewiston, Idaho. 53 head, 850 pound steers bring 123.25, and that's kind of out off the beaten path there as far as your 5-area feeding region. But the top quote that I saw anywhere come from the Schooley family there in Bloomfield Livestock Market, Bloomfield, Iowa. 59 head, 803 pound steers bring 136.75, and that's your feeder flash for Thursday.